For generations, a father's job was, well, pretty simple. Be the provider. But that whole role, it's pretty much crumbled. So what's taken its place? The uncomfortable truth might just be nothing. We're going to explore this powerful argument that the traditional role for fathers is gone, and a new one, well, it just hasn't shown up to replace it yet. So how do you even begin to wrap your head around a shift this big? Well, it's kind of wild, but it's all captured perfectly in 2 speeches. And get this, they were delivered at the exact same college, only 16 years apart. First up, in 1955, you have Adlai Stevenson, basically setting the stage. Then, in 1971, Gloria Steinem comes along and pretty much tears that stage down. These aren't just 2 speeches. They really represent 2 completely different worlds. And when you put them side by side, the difference is just staggering. I mean, in 55, Stevenson is telling a graduating class of women their main job is to help their husbands find purpose, to keep them whole. Then, just 16 years later, Steinem stands in front of the same kind of audience and says, marriage is a tool for subjugation. It's like the entire ground shifted from under everyone's feet almost overnight. Okay, so to really get where we are now, we've got to go back and understand what was lost in the first place. So let's take a closer look at that old status quo, the purpose of the provider. This quote right here really gets to the heart of it. See, the provider role wasn't just about bringing home a paycheck. Not at all. For men, the cultural demand to provide for a family gave them a super clear identity, a defined mission in life. You know, it was their culturally approved path to feeling purposeful and whole. And this entire role, this whole setup, it was all built on one single economic reality. Women were almost entirely dependent on men financially. The whole social structure was kind of balanced on that one fact. But that was all about to change dramatically. Which, of course, brings us to the Great Disruption. The women's liberation movement wasn't just a social movement. When you really dig into it, at its very core, it was an economic revolution. Yeah, this Margaret Mead quote just hits the nail on the head. The central goal of the movement was to give women the ability to pay their own bills, to make their own way in the world. And this pursuit of economic freedom was about to completely rewrite the rules for marriage and family. And you don't just have to take my word for it. The results are sitting right here in the data. Just look at this shift. For female college graduates in the 1950s, getting married was the immediate next step. It's just what you did. Today, less than half are married by their mid-30s. All of a sudden, a husband wasn't an economic necessity anymore. He became a social choice. So, women's roles expanded in a huge way, right? But what about men's roles? Well, this is where the argument points to something called a cultural lag, which in turn created a very modern problem, the dad deficit. This 4-step argument breaks it down perfectly. Okay, 1, the male role was the provider, built on women being economically dependent. 2, women gained that independence. 3, and this is the key part, women's roles expanded, but men's roles kinda didn't. And that lag leads us directly to step 4, the dad deficit. So, what is this dad deficit? Well, it's essentially a vacuum, a gap. Think of it like this. The old job description for father got deleted, but society never got around to writing a new one. Men have kind of been left in this cultural limbo. And this right here shows the core imbalance. The role of mother got a huge update. It expanded to include both breadwinning and caregiving. But the cultural script for father just never got that same update. It didn't expand in the same way to make caregiving a central expected part of a man's identity. All of this leads to the big, unresolved question that we're still grappling with today. If the provider role is obsolete, then what exactly is the new purpose of a father? Wow, this quote really captures the central tension here. That old system, it absolutely held women down, no question. But it also acted as a prop for men's identity, giving them a clear structure. And now that those props are gone, well, a lot of men are left feeling like they're falling. And so, here we are, left with this huge, essential, unanswered question. If the old purpose for fathers is gone for good, what new purpose is going to define them? The thing is, society hasn't really provided an answer, and that means it's a question we're all left to figure out for ourselves. So, what do you think comes next?
For basically all of human history, a man's identity was wrapped up in one single job, being the provider. It was a simple, clear deal. But what happens when that deal gets broken. Today, we're going to dig into the rise and, well, the fall of the provider role, the weird paradox it created for men, and the massive questions it leaves us with. So, let's get into it.
I mean, that's a huge question, right? But what's wild is that for a really, really long time, the answer was basically the same no matter where you looked in the world. It wasn't just about being strong or powerful. No, it was about duty. And that duty was built on a few key ideas.
So an anthropologist named David Gilmour looked at cultures all over the planet and found this common blueprint. He gave it a bit of a mouthful of a name: man, the impregnator, protector, provider. A man's purpose, basically his entire job description, was to create life, defend that life, and, this is the big one, to provide for it. Those three things, that was the bedrock of what it meant to be a man.
All right, so let's zoom in on that third pillar, because that's the one that shaped pretty much everything for millennia: the provider.
Just think about that for a second. We're talking generations upon generations, your great-great-grandfather and his before him. This was their central mission. It was simple, it was clear, and it was how a man connected to his family and his community. Your value as a man was literally measured by how well you could do that one thing.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It's this concept of a surplus. See, the provider role wasn't just about getting by. It was about creating more than you needed for yourself, and then sharing that extra with your family, your tribe. So in a way, providing was actually a form of nurturing. It was about putting everyone else first.
This quote from sociologist David Morgan just nails it. Being the breadwinner, it wasn't just about bringing home a paycheck. He calls it a moral category. It was about your character, your responsibility, your duty. And the flip side, failing as a provider meant you had failed as a man. Period.
Okay, so you've got this huge moral and economic duty. How did it actually work inside a family? Well, it was all built into something that sociologists called the family package deal.
The idea here is pretty simple. A man's access to being a father was literally bundled with his role as a husband. His relationship with his kids was basically filtered through his relationship with their mother. It was a two-for-one deal.
The roles were split right down the middle. Mothers had the direct, hands-on, primary caring role. Fathers, on the other hand, had an indirect role. Their main job was to support the mother, who then did the direct caring for the kids. Of course, tons of fathers did more, but providing, that was the fundamental, non-negotiable part of the deal.
So, and this is the really crucial part, this whole package deal created these chains of dependency. This wasn't just about one family. This was the social glue that formally tied men into the very core of society. It gave them a vital and absolutely indispensable role to play.
And you know, this system was incredibly stable for a very, very long time. But eventually, the central institution holding this whole thing up started to get some serious heat.
What was that institution? It was marriage. Marriage was the official contract. It was the social and legal document that made the whole thing official, binding the direct carer and the indirect provider together.
Now, there are two totally different ways to look at the history of marriage. You've got the conservative view, which says, hey, it worked. It created the dependencies we needed to channel male energy towards something good for society. And then you had the feminist view, which says that exact same institution was oppressive, that it was a cage that limited women's freedom.
But here's the one thing everyone seemed to agree on. Marriage was a binding force. It didn't just bind women to men, it also bound men to their responsibilities as husbands and fathers. The big disagreement was just over whether that binding was a good thing or a bad thing.
And that brings us to a really fascinating and often overlooked part of this whole story. What was it actually like for the men living this role? This is the provider's paradox.
Because for all of its social purpose, life as the provider could feel, well, empty. That classic post-war image of the organization man in his gray flannel suit commuting back and forth, it hints at this kind of quiet desperation, a feeling that you're living a life that was designed for you, not by you.
I mean, Arthur Miller just captured this perfectly with Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. Here was a guy who sacrificed everything, grinding away 50 weeks a year just for that 2-week vacation, all to be a good provider, and he still felt like a total failure. It's a tragic look at the absolutely immense pressure of that role. And this is the paradox. We rightly talk about how this traditional system limited women's lives, but it's also true that it stifled men's freedom. The expectations were rigid, the roles were incredibly narrow, and the pressure to succeed was just crushing. So, If the old system had serious flaws for everyone, and that whole package deal is broken, what do we do now? Where do we possibly go from here?
Well, the sources seem to agree on a few key points. First, the old contract is gone, it's just broken. Second, trying to go back in time isn't the answer. That's not a real solution. So what's needed is a total reinvention of fatherhood, one that isn't based on the old provider role, but is built on a man's direct, caring, hands-on relationship with his kids.
Which leaves us with the million-dollar question for our time, right? With this ancient role of provider no longer the main definition of being a man or a dad, what takes its place? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a man in the 21st century? There's no easy answer, and that is the conversation we are all a part of right now.
You know, in just the last 50 years or so, we've seen one of the most profound transformations in our society. A massive, massive shift in the roles of men and women. So today, we're going to dive into how this all happened and what it really means for everyone.
This line, right here, it was made famous by Gloria Steinem, and it became this incredibly powerful rallying cry. It just perfectly captured the core idea of the women's movement, this vision of a future where a woman's survival, her entire existence, wasn't dependent on a man.
And look, this wasn't just some catchy phrase on a t-shirt. As Steinem herself explained it, the goal was a world where a woman could support herself so she could choose to get married out of love, not because she needed to for financial survival. So yeah, the bicycle in this metaphor, that's financial freedom.
So, the big question is, have we arrived in that world? Well, if you look at the economic data, the answer is a resounding yes. In fact, the numbers show the traditional model of the male breadwinner hasn't just been tweaked, it's been completely flipped on its head.
Get this, in a whopping 41% of US households, women are now the main breadwinner. And that number comes from two key groups. You've got single mothers who are supporting their families, and a really fast-growing number of wives who now actually out-earn their husbands.
In this chart right here, it really shows you just how insanely fast this change has been. Today, 3 out of every 10 wives bring home more money than their husbands. That is double the rate from back in 1981. This isn't some slow, gradual thing. It's a massive economic realignment happening right inside marriage itself.
And you can see this new reality playing out everywhere. It's now the norm for mothers to work full-time. And in families where both parents are working, it's pretty much a coin toss who earns more. And at the same time, you've seen government support systems change, creating a safety net that's less about replacing a man's lost paycheck and more about directly supporting women and their kids.
And this quote from the British politician David Willetts, man, it just hits the nail on the head. The role of the state has fundamentally shifted, basically giving women a kind of economic independence from a partner that their grandmothers could have only dreamed of.
Okay, but this whole thing isn't just about money. Happening right alongside it is a social revolution that's just as massive, where the very ideas of marriage and motherhood, which were once seen as, totally inseparable, have been completely untied.
And when you look at the numbers here, they are just stark. Back in 1970, only about 1 in 10 births in the US happened outside of a marriage. Today, that number is 4 in 10. That's a huge decoupling of two life events that for centuries were considered one and the same.
So what's driving this? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is the near total disappearance of what used to be a powerful social rule, the shotgun marriage. For generations, if a woman got pregnant outside of marriage, it almost automatically meant there was a wedding before the baby arrived.
And when I say disappearance, I mean a stunning collapse. In fact, researchers say the decline of the shotgun marriage is the single biggest reason for the rise in non-marital births. For women with lower levels of education, the rate of marrying after getting pregnant dropped from 26% all the way down to just 2%. And that was in only 30 years. That's just incredible.
And of course, our attitudes have had to race to catch up with this new reality. I mean, the term working mother almost sounds a little dated now, doesn't it? Because it's just the norm. Back in 1977, less than half the population thought a working mom could have just as warm a bond with her child as a stay-at-home mom. Today, 3/4 of us believe that.
So, okay, we've got economic independence for women, we've got social liberation. These are incredible, hard-won victories, right? But every revolution has consequences, and this one raises a really crucial question. Now that the old social script is torn to pieces, what does this all mean for men?
Right, because that's the other side of this whole equation. When you dismantle an old order, what happens to the half of the population whose roles were defined by it? If a woman doesn't need a man for her economic survival anymore, what exactly is a man's primary role today?
And, this isn't some brand new question. Way back in 1980, the sociologist William Good made this really provocative observation in an essay called Why Men Resist. Basically, what he was saying is that as women gained power and independence, the practical value or marginal utility of men was bound to go down. It's a pretty blunt way to put it, for sure, but it gets right to the heart of the dilemma.
I mean, for generations, the script for being a man was, well, it was pretty straightforward, right? You got a job, and you became the provider. That role was your anchor. It was your identity, your status in the community, your purpose in your family. But now, that script has been completely torn up. With that central role as the breadwinner no longer a given, and in a lot of cases, not even necessary, many men are left feeling, well, dislocated, kind of adrift without a clear map or a compass for what comes next.
So this brings us full circle, right back to where we started, with that unforgettable image of fish and bicycles. Only now, we have to look at it from the other side.
And I think it's so important to remember just how unbelievably fast all of this has happened. 50 years might feel like a long time, but in the grand sweep of cultural history, it's the blink of an eye. The economic and social realities have just changed so rapidly that our culture, the stories we tell ourselves, none of it has really had a chance to catch up yet.
And so that leaves us with this one last, really provocative question. We started with the idea that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Well, if we accept that the world is now full of fish who are swimming along just fine on their own, then the real question we have to ask is, what's a bicycle for? In this profoundly new world, what is the new purpose for men?
Welcome to The Explainer. There's this quiet crisis happening in homes pretty much everywhere. It's this huge gap that's opened up between our classic idea of the family man, the breadwinner, and the actual economic reality of the 21st century. And that's what we're diving into today. So let's start with a question. It seems so simple, right? What makes a good husband? But you know what? The answer today is anything but simple. It's gotten incredibly complicated. I mean, for generations, the answer was a no-brainer. A man's job, his primary role, to be the breadwinner, to support the family financially. End of story. But that one, single, simple answer, it's been shattered by how the world works now. And that right there, that's the heart of the problem we're talking about. Our social norms. Those deep-seated beliefs we all have about what it means to be a man, what a family should look like, they just haven't caught up with the huge, huge changes in our economy. Yeah, sociologists actually have a name for this. They call it culture lag, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when our shared beliefs get stuck in the past, while the world around us, and especially the job market, is just racing ahead. And believe me, this lag is creating some really serious challenges for guys today. Sociologist Andrew Cherlin from Johns Hopkins, he just nails it. He says, and I'm quoting here, "We have a cultural lag where our views of masculinity have not caught up to the changes in the job market. Basically, our ideas about being a man are stuck in an economy that for a whole lot of people just doesn't exist anymore." Okay, now check this out, because the data here tells a really fascinating story. It shows this crazy paradox. A whopping 81% of adults with a high school education or less, they believe a man must be a provider to be a good partner. Think about that. The very men who have the hardest time fulfilling that classic breadwinner role in today's economy, they're the ones who are most likely to be judged by that exact standard. It's a real catch-22. So what happens when these old school beliefs slam into modern reality? Well, the impact is massive. And you can see it really clearly in what sociologists call the marriage market. And it's pretty simple, really. When a guy struggles in the job market, that struggle doesn't just stay at the office. Nope, it follows him right home. It directly affects his chances of finding a partner, of getting married. You could say economic instability pretty much becomes relationship instability. But how much does this really matter? Well, get this. One study estimates that almost 30%, 29% to be exact, of the entire drop in marriage rates can be pinned on this one thing: a shared dislike from both men and women for the idea of a wife earning more than her husband. Wow. And if you thought that was wild, here's another one. A different sociologist figures that a full 40%, 40 of the decline in marriage for people in their late 20s, this is between 1960 and 2013, is because men's earnings have fallen compared to what they used to be. That is a massive number. So the data is just crystal clear on this. Research from Alexander Kilowald shows that, while our expectations for wives have changed a lot, that old school husband as breadwinner idea, it's still incredibly powerful. So powerful, in fact, that a husband losing his job is now a major, major destabilizing force in a marriage. And look, this isn't just about relationships. It goes deeper. The slow, steady erosion of that provider role has left a lot of men feeling kind of adrift, questioning a really core part of their identity, their whole purpose. This feeling of being lost at sea, it's not totally new. There's this poem from way back in 1859, and it describes a bachelor as a horse without a saddle, a boat without a paddle, a ship without a sail. It really captures this long-held idea that a man without a family is just incomplete, lacking direction. And this really brings it into the modern day. The stats are pretty stark. On average, unmarried men tend to have worse health, lower employment rates, and weaker social networks than married guys. It seems the data suggests that men really benefit from that stability and connection. You have to understand, for generations, being a provider wasn't just a job. It was this incredibly powerful motivator. It was at the very center of what it meant to be a mature, responsible man, that disciplined self. It's what gave guys a powerful reason to drag themselves out of bed and go to work every single day. Okay, so this next quote from sociologist Jeff Dench is, well, it's a little provocative, but it really makes you think. He says, "The family may be a myth, but it is a myth that works to make many men tolerably useful." What he's getting at is that the traditional family, maybe with all its flaws, gave a lot of men a very clear, very functional role in society. Okay, so if that main role of provider is eroding, it brings up a much bigger question about purpose, right? And when you look at the research, you can actually see a pretty clear gender gap in where men and women find meaning in their lives. So Pew Research did this super interesting study asking people, hey, what gives your life meaning? And look at this. For career or job, men and women are basically neck and neck. But then you look at family? Whoa, 43% of women say their kids or grandkids are a huge source of meaning. For men, it's only 24%. And this ties right into a cool psychological idea called self-complexity. It's a fancy term, but it's pretty simple. It's basically about how many different hats you wear in life. How many different things, like being a parent, a worker, a friend, an artist, make you you. So if we generalize a bit based on that research, you can see how it plays out. The idea is that women, on average, tend to pull their sense of self from a wider variety of roles, and that diversity can actually make you more psychologically resilient. And that's where the danger lies. Think of it like investing. If all your identity is tied up in one stock, say the provider, and that stock crashes, well, it can feel like your entire portfolio, your entire sense of self is wiped out. It makes you incredibly vulnerable. So this all brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Where do we go from here? Because we know we can't just hit rewind and go back to some 1950s economy. That's just not an option. The way forward isn't about trying to rebuild those old, rigid models. It's got to be about creating a new foundation for what it means to be a father, one that really embraces gender equality and encourages dads to be more involved than ever. And here's the key. This doesn't just help kids. It gives men another powerful, meaningful role to play, another source of purpose in their own lives. And that really leaves all of us with a huge question for our time. In a world where all the old rules are out the window, what is the new foundation for modern fatherhood? What does it look like? What should it look like? All right, let's talk about what it means to be a father today. I mean, it's a role that's definitely changing, and some would even say it's in crisis. We're going to dig into something called the dad deficit and explore why there's this really urgent push to redefine what fatherhood even means in our modern world. So let's dive right in. Wow. That's a pretty powerful quote to kick things off, right? And think about it, that was back in 2008. Barack Obama was pointing directly to this problem that we now call the dad deficit. And it's not just about a dad not being physically present. It goes way deeper, to the very foundation of the family. This quote really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack. Okay, so dad deficit. It's a strong term, but what does it actually look like? Well, let's get into the numbers, because honestly, the statistics paint a really, really clear picture. 1 in 3. Just let that sink in for a moment. 1 in 3 kids completely lose contact with their father within just 6 years after their parents split up. And we're not just talking about him moving out of the house. We're talking about disappearing from their lives completely. That's a staggering number. And here's the thing, this problem doesn't affect everyone equally, not even close. Look at the role education plays. Get this, a dad who didn't finish high school is almost 6 times more likely to live apart from his kids than a dad who graduated from college. So it's pretty clear this whole deficit thing is hitting the most vulnerable families the hardest. You know, this isn't something that just happened overnight. Nope. This crisis has been building for decades. The number of kids living only with their mom has nearly doubled since 1968. That's a huge, long-term shift in how American families are structured. Okay, so we've seen the numbers, we know what's happening. But that just leads to the million-dollar question, right? Why? Why are so many fathers disconnecting? Well, the argument we're going to explore is that our very idea of what a father is supposed to be, it's just seriously outdated. I mean, it's pretty clear our social attitudes have changed, big time. The huge majority of young adults today think it's perfectly okay to have kids without being married. So our ideas about marriage have gotten way more flexible, right? But the problem is, our idea of what a father is hasn't kept up. And this is really the heart of the problem. For too long, the role of father has been all tangled up with the role of husband. It's like they're the same thing. So what happens when that marriage or relationship ends? Well, because those two roles are so intertwined, when you cut the cord on the partnership, you often end up severing the connection to the child, too. So this really breaks down the two competing ideas. On one side, you've got the old school breadwinner model. You know the one. Dad's main job is to provide, to bring home the money. It's a really narrow role, and frankly, it's becoming obsolete. But what we need now is something totally different, a model built on the dad's direct relationship with his kids. It's about engagement, not just a paycheck. So who gets hurt when we're stuck in this outdated model? The short answer is absolutely everyone. It's terrible for the kids who lose a parent. It's bad for women who often get stuck with the entire burden of raising them. And you know what? It's bad for men too. It locks them into this narrow little box and puts them at risk of losing the most important relationships they'll ever have. Okay, so if the old model is broken, what's the fix? What's the alternative? Well, the solution being put forward is a really urgent update. It's time for a total redefinition of fatherhood, one that actually works for the 21st century. All right, so here's the blueprint for what this modern fatherhood could look like. First, and this is the big one, you have to separate the role of father from the role of husband. They are not the same job. Second, the focus has to shift to the direct relationship between the father and the child. We're talking emotional connection, practical support, all of it. And third, we've got to expand a man's role way beyond just being a provider. It needs to include nurturing, teaching, coaching, the whole deal. This is so important. A dad's value to his kids has nothing to do with his marital status. In fact, this suggests that when parents are separated, having an active, engaged father might be even more crucial for a kid's well-being. Think about that. And it's really important to see this the right way. This isn't about diminishing men's roles at all. It's actually a huge opportunity to expand them, to make them bigger and way more meaningful. It's a chance for men to connect with their families in a much more complete and honestly more fulfilling way. Okay, let's zoom out for a second, because why does this matter so much? This goes way beyond just individual families. We're talking about updating a fundamental social institution, and that has massive implications for every single one of us, for the very fabric of our society. Now let's just pause on this idea for a second, because it's a big one. The argument here is that fatherhood, more than anything else, is what shapes mature masculinity. It's what anchors men to their communities, what gives them a real stake in the future. I mean, that is a profound claim, and it has absolutely huge implications. Now listen to this. This quote is from George Gilder, and it was written all the way back in 1973, but wow, does it feel like it could have been written yesterday? He's arguing that a man who's connected to his family and his community is also deeply connected to the social order. He's going to be way less likely to get pulled in by extreme ideologies or demagogues. The takeaway? Strong, engaged fathers are pretty essential for a stable society. So all of this really brings us to one final and absolutely crucial question.
Okay, we've seen the problem, we've looked at a new model for fatherhood, but the real challenge is actually making it happen. So how can we as a society build the kind of culture, the workplaces, the policies that actually support this new, more expansive, more engaged version of being a dad? That right there is the challenge in front of all of us.